Spilling tea, take two. All right, let's try this again, folks. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I am your host, Tiffany Daniels, and as always, when we start out on call center weekends, especially my Sunday, we are going back to that horrible world known as the JRC for the first video of the day. Before we get started, a few disclaimers. First off, a follow-up update in regards to the situation with Spectrum 10K is going to be posted after this video. There might be another one on the JD versus AH case, might not, really just all depends. There is going to be a video showing the artwork of a friend of mine who has recently passed away. I may do it, I may not, I still don't know. I feel a little bit rougher than I look. But anyways, few of our normal disclaimers. You are going to see the link to this particular document right there in the description box, as well as the other pertinent links to the Stop the Shocks campaign. We have the Autistica Hoya massive archive. We have the first video that I did when I was informed in April that the shocks were still taking place. We also have the Change.org Shut the Judge Rotenberg Center Down petition. Get the templates done. Get the signature done on the petition. Okay? We're not going to go any deeper than that. Let's go to what we're taking a look at here today. Now, folks, when we talk about the JRC, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of, as well as sometimes glimpse, video clip footage taken from surveillance camera footage of people with disabilities being tortured and abused. If you have young children present, please use your headphones. Also, folks, I am not myself today. I'm mourning that loss of a dear friend. So you're just going to have to bear with me here, okay? Thank you. Summary of current policies and procedures according to staff role. DVR Monitoring Shift Supervisor. The DVR Monitoring Supervisor must send an email to the residences at the start of each shift or prior to a transport, including the following information: the name of the DVR monitor who is monitoring each residence, and what his or her extension is, nursing routes, policy updates and changes, and policy reminders. Folks, by the way, if I'm repeating some stuff from yesterday, this stuff just kind of rebooted itself last night. There was a massive storm. I'm basing this based off of what was showing at the end of my last video. The supervisor also makes sure that certain residences are monitored at all times during the evening and overnight hours, and must send a report to the senior management after each shift detailing whether the monitors carried out their duties properly during that shift. How about y'all shouldn't exist and shouldn't be watching students in their homes 24/7? Voyeurs much? He or she must ensure that monitor keeps the DVR alarm function turned on during each shift. The supervisor is also responsible for phone calls that come into the direct phone line. Scheduling monitor. The scheduling monitor sits at the desk at 250 Turnpike Street to admit people into the building. DVR monitoring staff. During the school day, monitors watch what is happening live at the 240 building, while DVR monitors in the 250 Turnpike building keep an eye on the buildings. The DVR monitoring staff also make sure that the schedules are being followed during the academic day. They ensure that the students spread out within the two buildings in order to help staff maintain control. God forbid they don't control every fucking thing those students do. God, what's the matter with you, Judge? We don't want those autistics and other disableds controlling their lives, now do we? God. Monitoring is responsible for coordinating appointments and field trips and make all necessary notifications when there is an elopement. Can't have them escaping your hell, can we, Judge? During the overnight and weekend hours, DVR monitors are primarily responsible for monitoring residences that do not have in-home monitors, although monitors will spot check residences that do. 3 monitors are in the DVR monitoring room, while 3 DVR monitors rove between the residences. Key views will be identified for each residence that should be monitored by DVR monitoring staff. These views must be kept open at all times during the shift. However, monitors also keep an eye on all screens and help other monitors to do the same. Monitors are also responsible for constantly watching students on the watch list. This is the list of 514 students that must be monitored 24/7. Oh, must they, Judge? Must they? Really? Or is that what they tell you? Yeah. Ask me what happens if you try to monitor my ass 24/7. Ask. DVR must call each residence that is assigned to him or her at the beginning of each shift to identify him and herself and inform the residence supervisor that he or she will be monitoring the house during that shift. This call is logged into the phone log at the residence. DVR monitors also verify that bed checks are completed when required. DVR monitors will call residences with feedback and corrective measures if necessary. Oh, of course. We're not going to stop the practice of shocking disabled people in their sleep. We're just going to make sure it's not somebody outside of us that, gets us to do it. Forest trees, Judge. Forest trees. God. If monitors observe something that is against JRC policies and procedures, they must notify the residents and school supervisor and immediately watch the DVR footage to determine if it's necessary to send staff home. Or close it down. The direct staff and supervisors who were interviewed for this report indicated that DVR monitoring will also call the residences if students are not being properly supervised. Oh, so you remember when Jennifer Masumba told us, and some of the other reports, about how they will come down on staff if they're not pinpointing and shocking kids for behaviors? Yeah, I'm starting to think these judges just might be just as sick as the bastards who run this place. Or they really are that clueless, that ableist, and that unintelligent. Moving on. If there's a maintaining of safety or safety issue in the house, your program is a safety hazard. The entire program is a safety hazard. For the love of God, why is this not common sense? Or to warn staff of potentially escalating behavior by students. Oh, you mean when they talk out at you for shit like this? I mean that kind of behavior, right? Can't have them questioning authority. The horror. Staff interviewed for this investigating reported that DVR will not call the residences in order to have staff administrator aversive consequences, but rather to make them aware of any potentially unsafe or dangerous situations that may arise. Judge, the fact that you don't consider aversive treatment as unsafe to these kids blows my mind. And what's worse, there's a lot of people who agree with this type of thinking, that aversives are for our own good. You all flinch at the mere mention of spanking a neurotypical child, but you nod up in agreement when it comes to using adversives on disabled kids. Why? Treatment, they say. Horseshit. Absolute horseshit. And what's even worse is you teach the next generation to teach the next generation of disabled people the exact same way. It's a self-perpetuating circle of That's for another day, when I'm not quite so riled up. Staff interviewed for the investigation reported that DVR will not call the residences in order to have staff administer aversive consequences, but rather make them aware of any potential unsafe or dangerous situations that may arise. If a DVR monitor witnesses a behavior that would normally be treated with a GAD, fucking sick. But none of the staff who are at the residence witnessed the behavior, then the GED will not be administered. An alternate consequence may be administered. Oh, you mean like food and sleep deprivation? Thanks, Judge. In-house monitoring and supervisory staff. At residences where the GED is used, the designated supervisor will be the in-house monitor, who is responsible for everything taking place in the residence during the evening overnight hours, including answering all phone calls, reporting everything happening of significance to the overnight school supervisor as soon as possible, asking for guidance from the overnight school supervisor if necessary, sending a report to the senior management each night, and monitoring or delegating to monitor the audiovisual viewing station at the residence. The in-house monitor must also fill out an end-of-shift report that is sent to the JRC administrative staff every morning. In addition to the in-house monitor, there is also a shift supervisor who delegates tasks and responsibilities to the rest of the direct care staff, which means absolutely nothing in stopping these incidences. Judge, can we fill it up with more bullshit? Paperwork. DVR monitoring shifts overlap by 30 minutes. During this 30-minute overlap, monitors should be doing paperwork forms reports. Monitors should never be completing paperwork while they are assigned to watch the school or residences. Can't miss a behavior. How can we? The only exceptions are the DVR monitors must input GED applications into the computerized GED database immediately after the application occurs, because marking it makes it better. The same is true for restraints as they occur. Breaks. The DVR supervisor scheduled breaks. Monitors get one 30-minute break during a shift and must notify the school supervisor when they leave and return from a break. During evening or overnight hour shifts, the schedule monitor covers the break of a monitoring staff member. If the scheduling monitor cannot cover the break, the staff member taking the break must change the audio output from headphones to speaker. Alarm monitor. The alarm functions in the DVR software detects any sound or movement in a room and wakes up the appropriate screen so that the monitor sees it. It allows constant monitoring of an environment even if the active DVR window is not open. This function must be activated and enabled at all times. God, this is sick. Experience. Direct care staff must have strong evaluation scores and substantial experience in order to be considered for a DVR promotion. Most staff who enter DVR have been JRC employees for at least 1 year. God help us. Those who are survived and been so desensitized to the screams of helpless disabled people that now they get to control it. God, count my ass out. Emergencies. If the power goes out at the JRC campus and or any of the residences, then the DVR monitoring staff will rove or drive to each residence to ensure the students are safe and that the policies are being observed. Safe in one of those houses run by the JRC. Safe, you say? Judge, I would like to know your definition of safe when it comes to disabled people. I bet it'd be rather enlightening. Training. The DVR training is now supplemented with situational awareness training, where staff are given hypothetical scenarios to help them become more aware of the possibility of a similar hoax at JRC. Telecommunications. JRC's telecommunication policies and procedures are a critical component to ensuring the safety of the students now and in the future. Other than a student pretending to call the school, as happened in the August 2007 incident, it's conceivable that the critic of the school might attempt to manipulate telecommunications system to make a threat against the JRC, which could endanger the students. Issues identified followed the 2007 incident. I think this is some of the same stuff we went over yesterday, but we are going to go over it a little bit again, and we'll probably cover some new stuff in this as well. My apologies in advance. Like I said, I'm not in my normal mindset right now. In August 2007, there was no verification process to ensure that individuals calling into the residence were authorized and properly identified. This allowed the caller to call the residence and convince the staff at the residence that he was in fact calling from DVR monitoring department. Even when the staff grew concerned about the strange instructions from the caller, they failed to call the DVR monitoring office to verify the identity of the caller. There was no caller ID system installed in the phones at the residences, so the staff could not verify that the caller was from an authorized phone number. There was only one non-cordless phone in each residence, with no other available phones, because the staff is required to lock their phones up during their shifts. The internet was down that evening, making it difficult for staff to access emergency contact information. The shift manager was not the person who answered the phone, and he failed to take over the phone call when he was able to do so. Also, direct care staff at the residence reported that they did not know how to contact a student's clinician directly. Excuses, excuses, excuses. Oh yes, let's hear about all their changes that change absolutely nothing. Following the 2007 incident, JRC changed all residents' phone numbers and no longer publishes these numbers. All of these cordless phones at the residences have caller identification and cannot receive calls from unlisted or blocked numbers. A second phone on IP internet phone line was installed in all JRC residences where the GED is used, which keeps the phone numbers of key JRC contacts on speed dial. Gotta have those guys on speed dial. After all, we have to shock them into compliance, right? All incoming calls to students at the residences must go through the DVR monitoring department for verification before being forwarded to the residents on the IP phone. Further, each residence has a list of approved phone numbers and the individuals associated with these numbers. Should the IP phone line go down, incoming calls must be answered by the highest ranking supervisor on shift, who verifies the phone number provided by the caller and the caller's name against the phone caller ID and the resident's list of approved numbers. Additionally, parents are encouraged to call students during school hours between 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. to minimize the number of calls to residences at night. Current policies and procedures. The DVR monitoring office is not authorized to call staff and instruct staff to consequate GED behaviors and cannot authorize staff to give additional numbers of GED consequences. Really? Because that is the exact opposite of how things work. According to the behavioral sheets themselves, just saying. Procedure. All residential phone calls are made to the JRC main number, and they are screened by the DVR office and transferred to the residence via IP phone, or residence is contacted by DVR and instructed to call the individual back. This is the procedure regardless of whether the caller is a parent, guardian, friend, or a staff member, such as the case as a case manager, clinician, or residential supervisor. If someone calls a residence directly, they are redirected to call the JRC main number. The designated supervisor is required to answer all incoming phone calls unless there is an emergency or the supervisor is taking a scheduled break. The supervisor must also keep the resident's cordless phone with him or her at all times. All calls must be direct logged by the designated supervisor, including the call made by the DVR monitor assigned to the residents at the start of his or her shift. Such inconsistency with this policy was noted throughout the interviews with direct care supervisors and staff. All reported that any staff member could answer the phone at the residences and that supervisors were not required to speak with every caller, which is inconsistent with JRC's written policy on this subject. They do a lot that is not part of their written policy. The anonymous call rejection system automatically rejects calls from people who intentionally block their number or name. All JRC internal extensions can be accessed through the JRC internal IP phone line. If the IP phone or JRC main line is down, all incoming calls must be verified by the designated supervisor, who must ask the caller for their name, reason for calling, and phone number. Tell the caller he or she will call him back, check the emergency phone number sheet, and verify the phone number for calls received from the JRC employee. Check the student's phone call approval list and verify the number for calls received from a parent or agency. Contact Danielle Brewer, the residential director. One second. Sorry. If a phone number cannot be verified, and log in the residential phone log once the number has been verified. Staff should not verify a phone number by checking only the caller ID. So folks who wonder why these kids didn't just call their parents and get out of there, look at this. They say this is to fix the 2007 incident, but do you not see the glaringly obvious? Students are not allowed to reach out to speak about what's happening to them there without the monitors, the supervisors, the head of the JRC knowing about it. Think about that. Safety my ass. All direct care staff and supervisors interviewed noted that when the parents or individuals call the residences directly, staff would redirect them to DVR for verification. Throughout interviews with both direct care staff and JRC administrators, there was some confusion about whether JRC staff, including students' treatment teams, can call residences directly or if they need to go through DVR as well. Although direct care staff and supervisors noted that this rarely, if ever, happens, some thought that the treatment teams are able to call the residences directly through the IP phone line, while others believed that they would have to go through DVR, just as any other caller would. JRC administrators also had different understanding on this issue. Calls from parents, guardians, and other individuals. Parents and guardians and other individuals on the student's call list, attorneys, social workers, and clergy, are asked to call their children at the JRC school building between 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. If a parent or guardian must call his or her child at the child's residence, the designated supervisor should direct the call to the DVR monitoring to be verified. A DVR monitor must verify the number and call the residence to let the designated supervisor know that the student can make an outgoing call to the parent. Then the student can then make the call from his or her residence to the parent. So there's a lot of glaringly horrible things going on here. Such as how tightly these phone calls are controlled. So that it was already restrictive for these kids to be able to speak with anyone. And now they are using this incident to tighten the reins even further. If no one can use these phones to reach the outside world, and the monitoring has been tightened to the point that they are not even allowed private conversations with their guardians who are on their list, you can see how much control the school has over everything. Let's go ahead and read this further. Personal calls are not allowed at school or residences. See what I mean? Staff may receive emergency calls at work. Staff should give anyone who may need to contact them in an emergency the main number to the school. Then the caller should clearly state that it is an emergency and give the full name of the person they are trying to contact. On nights and weekends, emergency calls are directed to the DVR office. Cell phones. Certain staff, such as clinicians, have JRC cell phones and Nextel pagers. God, what is this, the 90s? Non-JRC cell phones cannot be brought to school or residences except for staff that travel to and from work by other means other than a car. In that case, phones must be immediately locked up. JRC cell Nextel phones must be turned off on vibrate during meetings, unless it's an emergency. Calls received during the meeting should be forwarded to the voicemail. Staff must notify the front desk they will be unavailable to receive phone calls during the meeting. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and stop the video here. And basically, what we've looked into is the judge continues to miss the elephant in the room. What am I talking about? This idea, this concept that as long as something is called treatment, it's safe. It's this fallacy that has permeated our scientific culture for decades. Even when we have thousands upon thousands of documents, photos, and histories that prove the exact opposite. Just because something is called adversive therapy doesn't make it a real, legitimate therapy. Adversives are designed to punish. And what are they designed to punish? They are designed to punish so-called unwanted behaviors that come directly from the student's own neurology. These are not willful acts that they are doing, okay? It's not willful acts of disobedience like you have a rebellious child, which is how they treat it at the JRC and how ABA treats it. The old adage of you eat what I put in front of you or you won't eat it all won't really work with an autistic who would rather starve to death than eat something that causes them physical pain due to sensory. You see where I'm going with this. Adversive therapy is just another fancy word that the medical community likes to use in order to punish, abuse, and torture us for being disabled. Let me say that for you again. Adversive therapy is just another word for abuse, torture, and psychological trauma created by those who are so-called professionals. Adversives are used in order to traumatize us, to act in a manner that makes you, the non-disabled person, feel more comfortable. Even if that disabled person is not doing anything that in any way threatens you or causes you any kind of harm. And on that sort of note, folks, I'm going to go ahead and close out this video here. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do tend to get removed from time to time. So folks, please don't forget to hit that like button. Hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the comments. Feed that algorithm. I do appreciate your time this morning. and your understanding. And I hope each and every one of you have a good one. Bye-bye.